So I said I'd never do reviews on this channel, yet here we are. Spoilers for the game ahead. I played on amazing or normal difficulty, but first, a short little history of my Spider-Man fandom. So I started my enjoyment of Spider-Man as like a really young kid with the animated series. I've actually never read any of the comic books, but I really love the animated series. You know, the one like with the funny kind of dark theme tune. That might not have been true to the comic books, but it was incredibly fun. It had loads of cool characters in it. Following that, I got really into the Spider-Man 2000 game and the Spider-Man Enter Electro game. Both of those games, while maybe not mechanically the best, were really cool for the time and were really cool for things like costumes and expanding the Spider-Man world. The next game I played was Spider-Man 2 on the PS2, which being a movie tie-in, the story wasn't very good and it kind of sucked a little bit. But what it did nail is, well, one, Doc Ock, and two, the web swinging, which is has become now really the most important part of a Spider-Man game. So, that being said, the traversal and travel in this game is excellent. It's a bit daunting at first due to all the different kind of features that include web zipping, point launching, wall running, momentum management, diving, all that kind of stuff. This is depth rather than width, because the more you get to know about the game and the more you learn about it, the more fun it actually gets and the more kind of Spider-Man-y you actually feel. And when you nail it, it feels oh so good. The graphics are also really beautiful, so that's obviously a good plus. So if you've ever seen a Spider-Man movie, you know it's very hard to nail a Spider-Man story completely. However, this game seems to have nailed it fairly well because they've affected a kind of solid, well-written Spider-Man story that flows well and doesn't feel forced. The only flaw that I really have with the story are the Mary Jane sections. They're boring, though they thematically fit with the story. It kind of harms the pace quite a lot, I think. And to go from smashing criminals and webbing up mercenaries to using Mary Jane to look at things. Wow. Although then she gets a stun gun, so yeah, that's really fun.
Sable agents who would love to meet you.
Puzzle elements are also pleasingly optional, but I never found them particularly frustrating. They're always fairly fulfilling and fun. J. Jonah Jameson thankfully appears in this game. Not in person, but he has little podcast snippets that kind of come out, these little sound bites that you hear while swinging around the city. They're nearly always hilarious.
Folks, you know I'm not one to promote conspiracy theories.
Black Cat, Taskmaster, and Harry Osborn also appear in the game. Only one of them actually appears in person, but the rest of them have their kind of presence around the game, and they have side missions associated with them and little challenges and stuff. That's a really cool feature, not having to include them, but having their presence in the world was a really cool thing. Also, the voice acting is really excellent, especially from Yuri Lowenthal as the man himself, Peter Parker, Spider-Man.
Live by the beatdown, die by the beatdown.
The antagonists are very relatable, or at least the ones that get lots of voice dialogue are. And there are twists and fan service in the game that literally made me yell because they were really great. So normally stories from video games, I'm very much like, yeah, okay. But it was really entertaining in this game, and I think they really nailed it. Combat, this is a really important area as well. Much like the swinging, it can be kind of hard and daunting at first with so many features and things you can master in it. It's quite easy to get hit, it's not a very forgiving game, and taking damage doesn't really make you feel very Spider-Man-y. But then you master the Spider Sense dodge mechanic and the combat flows kind of like the Arkham series, but faster and over a wider area than the Arkham series, and in terms of where the combat happens. It's similar in that it relies on building up a combo meter and executing finishes, but that's far from the only thing that you can do to kind of defeat your opponents, and you don't find yourself repeating that same aspect over and over again. There's gadgets you can use. Quick time events are thankfully fairly sparing in the game. They do feature, but when they do, they feel fairly justified because it's been after a long fight and they only last for, maybe 10 seconds or so. I found the gadgets in particular to be much more useful and versatile than in the Arkham series. In the Arkham series, I pretty much ignored most of the gadgets, but in this game, you pretty much either have to use them or just will benefit a great deal from using them. As a final note on the combat, I had a little conversation with one of my friends, my friend Susie, about the combat, and she sort of came and sat down and was like, "Oh, so how can you tell if you have defeated an enemy? How can you tell if it's already been beaten?" And it made me really think about the deeper mechanics of the game, because the sound design is excellent when you kill an enemy. There's a kind of a satisfying vibrate on your controller, a visual cue where the screen flashes white for a second, and also a kind of familiar crack sound, so you instantly know you defeated that enemy and can move on to the next one. So overall, the sound design for the combat and everything working in synergy is really, really, really good. Obviously in the Spider-Man game, bosses are going to be important as well, because he has this kind of rogues gallery, most of who actually appear in this video game. The bosses I found to be well scaled and challenging rather than frustrating. They hit right in the middle for me, which was excellent. They were fun and memorable without overshadowing the rest of the game, because you have to replay them so many times. Obviously all of them are classic Spider-Man villains, and they use the same combat system as the main enemies. There isn't any kind of silly extra mechanics that they added in for the bosses, which I really liked, because you can get really good at the combat and you use that to defeat the bosses properly. And they require different methods depending on what that supervillain is good at, which I really liked as well, tailoring each boss to the situation. Only once when I died, I think, did I get irritated, because the game gives you kind of clues to prevent you from feeling like you've been killed unfairly, which is a really big plus, I think. Just a couple of things to say about some other parts of the game. Open world elements are obviously present, and there are some leveling up kind of RPG style elements as well. There's a wide variety of customizable gadgets, skills and suits, and that really helped the game to feel unique to me as a player, despite the fact that obviously the character's fairly rigid and the story is fairly set. I particularly liked how the suits have different abilities with them and all stick in the cinematics. They don't disappear or doesn't change you back automatically to another suit. They're also all based on Spider-Man comic storylines apparently, which is nice. The challenges and enemy bases are also repeatable with different score levels, adding this kind of replay value to it. But sadly this doesn't apply to the story missions. There isn't a new game plus or a way to repeat the story missions short of starting a new game as far as I'm aware, which maybe they could think about implementing in DLC. The stereotypically crowded open world map that people often complain about in games that are open world actually makes sense for Spider-Man, as he's famously unable to manage his time correctly, so it kind of makes sense to be jumping around the map between all these different areas. And this is even referenced multiple times in the plot, so it fits thematically as well. So this is a segment I thought I'd include on this called... Introduce yourself.
Hello. My name's Emily, and I'm your girlfriend.
I don't know. Maybe.
Why are you so tall? Because I'm sitting on a cushion.
Did you like this game?
I mean, I didn't play it, but I watched you play it, and I enjoyed watching it.
Why did you like watching it?
Well, I like Spider-Man, so that was helpful. And it was fun, like when you like swing from building to building. That was fun to watch.
Was there a thing you didn't like?
I didn't like the what's that villain called? Where he's like, what's he called?
Mr. Negative?
Yeah, that one.
Mr. Negative.
I didn't like that one because he was like, it kind of freaked me out. There was one scene where like there was all ghosts or something.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like that. But I thought it was a cool character though. Is it actually from the...
Yeah, very well.
Okay. Yeah, I liked that one. No, I didn't like that one. I don't know.
Wise words.
Also, I liked Dr. Ock in this one.
Doc Ock?
Yeah.
Dr. Ock.
That's what it's called.
Very good. That's the end of this segment. That's the end of this segment. Goodbye.
Is that all I had to say?
Goodbye.
I can't say anything more.
Goodbye.
I've got loads to say.
Goodbye. Goodbye. As a final note, I just want to say how I feel about the game overall. I will be buying the DLC for this game if it comes out, pretty much immediately, I think. I will come back to this game, I think, if I want the kind of Spider-Man-y experience, just because the traversal's nailed so well, and I might even start a new game. I mean, typically I don't have time to do that, but I would like to do that in future if I have the time. I can't express how much I actually enjoyed this game. I was riveted from start to finish, and I didn't play any other games for the entire time I had this game available to me. It blends the kind of cinematic storytelling aspect of the MCU and gaming perfectly. It doesn't allow the story to overshadow the gaming, doesn't allow the gaming to overshadow the story. The only issues I had with the game were obviously the lack of New Game Plus and the character sections where you don't play Spider-Man. I understand why they're needed, I understand why they got put in, but I just personally found them pretty boring, and I feel like they screwed up the pace a little bit. And often Spider-Man's in some of the scenes where you're playing another character and it feels pointless. Why not just play Spider-Man? Anyway, that's what I disliked about the game. Miles in particular, Miles Morales, was a cool character to introduce to the game. Definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of kind of Spider-Man lore. And the last thing that I hope is that this game gives rise to many more MCU games that aren't necessarily tied to the MCU stories. Like, it would be really awesome to see an Iron Man game done properly, really cool maybe to see a Thor game done properly in this way. Obviously, I think maybe they'd have to be done in slightly different ways to this game, but I think there are certainly ways you could do it. If you enjoyed this, guys, I'm probably going to end up doing more gaming videos and reviews, possibly. Subscribe with the button, and like this video if you enjoyed it.